Welcome back. The soaring prices of food have undeniably placed significant financial strain on many Canadian families and businesses, including small business owner Boaz Rahamim, whose restaurant is struggling to survive due to the escalating costs from food to borrowing. Zed News videographer Darren Maharash has the story.
Thank you. That's for you, bro. Thank you. You're welcome. Grab the iced teas from the fridge. Here you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, it's no secret that inflation has had a big impact on small businesses across the country. And here at Goldie's, things have reached a boiling point for this Toronto sandwich shop.
Restaurants in general are extremely tough business already, and we've seen a major slowdown, especially with this latest wave of inflation. So just on a day-to-day basis, it's a struggle to get by. It starts with the rising interest rates. People have less money to spend on a meal. They're also paying more for groceries as well. So people don't have as much money to go and spend on extracurricular activities like eating at a restaurant. Those cans used to cost, it was like $24. Now they're going for like $32 as an example. Honey, $19.99. They are up to $27.99 now. Perrier, these ones used to come for $20. They are now going for $32 a case. This one was going for, at the time, for $25. Now they're going for double, $50.
$50.
$50, double.
Boaz says aside from keeping his product top quality, despite rising prices, the majority of his business these days that have helped keep the ship afloat have come from third-party delivery apps and catering.
This customer's ordered with us a few times, and then what ends up happening, they try our food, they'd be like, oh wow, you know what? Goldie's is amazing. Let me go and see what this place is all about. And now they put us on the map, and they come and they sit down and they have the full experience. So without those third-party platforms, it's really hard to, market your brand and really get people to come in.
A lot of places, you have to phone and find out first if they're still in business to go.
Before inflation, we had this restaurant would be full at lunch, and this is, what time is it now? 1 o'clock. It's empty. It's a sad sight, right? We have one customer sitting in the restaurant right now. We used to have this place was buzzing.
It's always tough to hear about businesses struggling, especially when it's because of factors that are outside of their control. And it's easy to see how a double whammy of rising interest rates and high food prices is hitting the wallets of everyday Canadians. It's something we've seen unfold for over a year now. And I know that it's something that you've been covering closely at the Peak.
It almost feels like there's two economies. There's the economies of the large corporations that are able to generate higher profits than ever, and then there's the economy of smaller businesses that are getting hit the hardest by these exact type of inflation issues. The cost of producing the goods that they sell is just more expensive, and then there's a broader downturn in consumer spending that's hitting them even harder. And to make matters worse, over the past few years, these are the same businesses that had to find a way through the pandemic. Lockdown after lockdown, being forced to take on debt just to stay alive. And they're at the point now where they have to, on top of the issues around inflation and the increased cost of goods that they're selling, they now have debt obligations that they have to pay off. And so that's creating a scene where you walk down any main street and you'll see business after business closing. They just can't keep going anymore. And at the same time, it must be so frustrating for those small business owners that look at some of the biggest companies in the country doing really well. And there's that dissonance there that's really hard to reconcile, and it's very challenging.
Sylvain, what is actually causing food inflation?
How long do you have? I mean, there's so many factors. Weather patterns have actually impacted harvests all over the world, including in Canada. So if you're wondering what's going on with beef, well, it's the drought in the Midwest and the drought in the prairies. Wheat futures are, the good news is that generally speaking, commodity prices are actually much lower than last year. So that's helping companies overall, including restaurant owners like the one we just saw. So overall, we are expecting things to be much calmer in the fall and over the winter, but we are expecting food prices to continue to rise for the next at least year or so.
What about the carbon tax? How has that impacted food prices?
So we're actually doing a study right now on the carbon tax. Retail wise, it is almost impossible to measure exactly the impact of the carbon tax on retail prices because retail prices are actually impacted by our own behavior, consumers. retail prices are impacted by the weather, lots of different things that that can actually impact the demand of certain products. But up the food chain, what we're able to figure out is that to measure the increase of certain drivers, it's much easier, including the carbon tax. And we actually do believe that industrial prices actually have been impacted way more by carbon pricing than retail.
Jim, last week the big grocery execs were summoned to Ottawa, and the Prime Minister and Francois-Philippe Champagne basically gave them until Thanksgiving to conceive of a plan to stabilize food prices. So first of all, my question to you is greedflation real? And are these guys actually raking in record profits off of their food?
Thanksgiving was an interesting date for the deadline there, of course, so that we can feel a little better about our turkey. Obviously, nothing big is going to change by Thanksgiving, so that's a symbolic date. I think inviting the CEOs to Ottawa for that meeting, it happened behind closed doors, was potentially useful. And we've actually seen other countries, France and Britain, for example, have tried this jawboning, where the government puts some pressure on the major supermarkets and the major food manufacturers to try and restrain their price increases and pass on the lower costs that we are seeing in the supply chain, as Sylvain just mentioned. There is no doubt, Marissa, that record high corporate profits in certain industries, not in all, in certain industries have contributed to the inflation that we've experienced. The oil and gas sector is the worst culprit there. Their profits went up 1,000%. After the invasion of Ukraine. We were paying so much more for energy that was produced, refined, and consumed right here in Canada. So that was all about higher profits. It's also been clear in other strategic industries, including minerals, building products, the auto sector. It's also been true in the food industry. There is no doubt that food manufacturers and food retailers, the big supermarkets, have not just passed on higher costs, they've also fattened their profit take at the same time. That didn't cause this whole outbreak of inflation, but it certainly made it worse for end consumers.
If I may, Marissa, I was actually in the room with the Big Five along with the minister to brief the group on greedflation and different measures we can take to control food prices. And again, Jim and I will respectfully disagree on this issue, but I actually don't think there's any evidence of profiteering at all. In fact, if you actually look at food sales specifically, same store food sales growth, it's been underwater for most cases, except for perhaps 2 or 3 quarters. For most grocers, they've actually been able to make money, record profits in some cases, yes, but selling other things than food, like cosmetics and drugs, not necessarily food. And the other issue, as I mentioned earlier, industrial prices have actually have outpaced the CPI. And that's why I think that really the focus has to be on measures to control food prices instead of blaming anyone.
All right, hold that thought. We will pick this up right on the other side. Don't go away.